Alright, so let's do the tier list for Vigors in Bioshock Infinite. Alright, so let's start with Possession. This is the first Vigor you get. So when fully upgraded, it can affect humans whose effect it expires on, Possession's effect expires on will kill themselves, and the other upgrade lets it be much cheaper. The upgrade that makes it cheaper makes it roughly half the cost. So you can see here I have that upgrade, so Possession is quite cheap. So we can possess a dude, he fights for us, he'll aggro. Generally speaking, they die really fast unless it's like a really good power enemy. So in this case, he got a little bit of damage out, but it basically just killed him. So depending on what Possession is used on, it's either insanely strong or kind of weak. So the insanely strong Possession is when you can get a big enemy like a beast or something that can deal good damage. You can use it on like firemen, and it's quite strong, but they won't kill themselves. So it's definitely, I would say it's not one of the strongest Vigors. It does have its use though. I mostly use it for, I almost never use this in combat. For the most part, I use Possession to get coins, like out of combat from vending machines. You can see me using this correctly here. So I would say Possession is probably, I guess, A tier for resources, and in combat it's like B tier. Like in combat it's not the best Vigor. Like I feel like most of the other Vigors are better, but outside of combat it's really good just for constantly giving you money for upgrades, so that's huge upside. Possessing certain things can be really strong though. So for example, oh, that's almost dead. You can possess like turrets and it can be pretty powerful and high impact, but you basically need the upgrade because otherwise it uses like a fourth or a third or even half of your salts bar. So depending on how many infusions you have, you could be using a lot of resources just to get an enemy on your side. So it can really fall off. So I would say overall it's A tier though. And once you have the upgrades, I would say in combat it's basically A tier in combat. So let me just kill this guy.
That'll do.
Oops, like turning me back around. Alright, so here's our buddy. The AoE is okay. It costs an insane amount to use though, so I don't recommend running it. You can AoE possess a bunch of humans, like, you know, non-robots, and they will kill themselves except for one of them. Like all of them will kill themselves except for one. But yeah, I would say it's A tier. Devil's Kiss. This one's really simple. Just A tier. Good damage. Pretty reliable. The upgrades are good. Good on all difficulties. There's no real downside to it. The trap is okay, like when you make a trap of it. I don't recommend making a trap of it. I would just throw it at an enemy. It's really good for extending your reach, like if you're running like a shotgun build, for example. It gives you some damage at range. You can throw it at an angle to throw it even further. So for example, kind of like this. Except in that case I hit an overhanging thing. But you can like lob these. And you can see here it's like spreading into the clusters, so it's quite powerful. Definitely at minimum A tier. I wouldn't put it any higher than that because while it does deal good damage, it doesn't like break the game, and that's what S tier is. Basically something that's so good it more or less breaks the game. Murder of Crows. In my opinion, this is like B or C tier. Here, let's actually test this live right now. So it's useless against machines, so it can't be S tier, right? Because in order to be S tier, it has to be good in every situation, or have some really overpowered use case. So it literally does nothing to machines. Let me just kill this machine. The trap version of it's kind of useless, in my opinion. I would rather just use it. So like, here's the use case, right? Use it on a group of enemies. That lightning was from a different proc. But against normal enemies, I would say this is pretty good, but it does not affect motorized patriots. So I would say against basic enemies, it's like A tier, but in general, I would say it's B. The reason I'm giving this B tier is because it is completely useless against a huge portion of enemies, and especially like mini bosses. So that kind of knocks it down. I mean, it is good against groups of enemies, but if enemies are far apart, the crows will not swarm them all. So for example, if you have a group of enemies here and a group of enemies here, and you use it on this group of enemies, it will swarm and interrupt them and stun lock them for like a few seconds, whereas this one is unaffected. And that's not like anything bad about it, but I think in Bioshock 1 and 2, the bees would spread like over time and the swarms would stay out, so that is one thing working against it. If you want to argue that Vigor combos make this better, You don't have that many unless you get like gear that can recharge salts. Burning through salts to deal damage isn't the best way of using your plasmids or your vigors. You're much better off like using a vigor and just killing enemies with like some kind of AoE weapon like the shotgun or whatever. So in my opinion, Crows is B tier. Bucking Bronco I would say is an easy A tier. I wouldn't put it above A tier or below because the ability just to CC groups of enemies for cheap sets it apart from most things aside from Shock Jockey, which is kind of like almost exactly the same. It's like that group back there, I could have just used one much cheaper use of Bucking Bronco, CC'd a bunch of them, and then blew them away with a few shells. So in my opinion, Bucking Bronco is just better than Crows. Because it basically does the same thing. It doesn't damage them, but Crows don't even do that much damage anyways. It's just much cheaper. You can use it through things. Like if you use Crows through a thing, I'm fairly certain it doesn't do anything. If you use Bucking Bronco through a wall, it doesn't matter. It'll just hit things. You can see here it just travels right through shit. So I think it's much better. I think it's A tier. We have Charge S tier. Why is Charge S tier? You can teleport to any enemy as long as you can see most of their body. So like if an enemy is down here, I can charge right to them. It gets you invincibility on charge. It deals good damage. It can combo. It recharges your shield when upgraded. It can also be upgraded to deal some extra bonus damage. The attack itself can be charged with no increase in salts to deal increased damage. It inherits your weapons buffs on your gear. Charge is just fucking crazy. Charge with volley, charge with shotgun, charge with any weapon that can hit multiple foes, even like an SMG, is really strong. Charge is like one of the best abilities for sure. It's S tier because it can recharge your shield and give you invincibility while killing enemies and putting vulnerability on them. And it can move you around. Like you can kite enemies. If there's a single enemy really far away, you can charge right to them. You can charge up onto platforms that you can't get to normally. You can charge down onto things. So like I could charge an enemy as long as I can see them and there's no physical objects in the way, I can charge them. So definitely S tier. Undertow, I'm going to put this at C tier. It costs a lot. Bucking Broncos basic use is better than this one's basic use. Like this is very expensive. It combos the Shock Jockey because it puts water on dudes. The alt fire is the real standout thing about it, where you can like hold the charge and pull dudes towards you. You can get up to 3 people pulled towards you if they're kind of close in proximity to each other. This CCs them and puts vulnerability on them. You can also stand near a ledge, pull dudes towards you, and then blow them off if you want to do that. But if you just hit them with like a simple volley gun round, they're probably dead. So I would say this is C tier. The alt fire is really fun to use. I like it. I love the effects on this. I wish it was cheaper. If it was cheaper to use, it would be it would rank it higher. But in this game, it can be hard to get salts back, and unless you get good RNG and get good gear that refills salts on like kill or whatever, like in this playthrough, I'm on the end of my 1999 playthrough. I do not have a single piece of gear that can recharge my salts. So I have to be very smart about how I use Vigors, and if I'm not, like I can't afford to run Undertow. It just burns too much salt. It just burns through your salts. So, but it's really fucking cool. Like I love the effects. The VFX look like amazing. It just looks really fucking cool. So, but yeah, C tier unfortunately. Return to Sender, S tier. Why is it S tier? 5 seconds of invincibility, just from the single use. It's really cheap to get 5 seconds of invincibility. You can hold it, absorb damage from any side. You become invincible while holding this. It does drain, but as you absorb bullets, it scales the damage. In my Return to Sender video, I actually discovered that you can take a Return to Sender ball, throw it, and then just kind of like stand. And enemies will always try to shoot you in the torso and head for the most part. Sometimes you will get hit in the feet. But what you can do is have yourself half exposed. So like let's say there's a group of enemies in here. You can throw a ball right here. And you can shoot volleys through this. You can jump and shoot, but this will just continue to absorb bullets. So, like the fact that you can get invincibility, like check this out, it's absorbing bullets. So this will just keep absorbing bullets, but you can jump over and shoot. So enemies will shoot, wait for them to stop shooting because they'll reload or whatever, and then just shoot them. Or you can just use the volley gun or the rocket launcher and just shoot shit through this. This is S tier. The fact that it also can like redirect damage at enemies is also S tier. The fact that you can have 5 seconds of on-demand invincibility is fucking crazy. Only one of the 2 upgrades is really worth running, but I don't even think these balls disappear. I think these just stay here until an enemy touches them. Like these are like invincibility balls. You just put these wherever you want to hold a position, and enemies can't hit you. I'm pretty sure projectiles, like incoming enemy volley gun shots, will go through these, but most enemies use guns, like bullets, guns that shoot bullets. So like these things are fucking crazy. Like, and even just the basic use of this, aside from this little gimmick, makes it really good. But definitely S tier. So to recap, I believe I put possession at A tier for mostly economy, and combat it's not as good, but A tier just for economy because it helps you buy upgrades, which is important in this game. Devil's Kiss for A tier for damage, doesn't have much else aside from that. It has a small interrupt on explosions to some enemies, but not all. And the damage is good. It can clear out groups of enemies. Murder of Crows, I believe I said was B tier, because it's decent, but it lacks like damage. It's pretty expensive. It's not the best. Then we have... Oh, wait, I never did Shock Jockey. Oh my god. Alright, so Shock Jockey. I totally skipped Shock Jockey. Shock Jockey, Chain Lightning, and the headshot damage and the damage multipliers, I would say make it S tier. This is a cheap AoE spam. If you hit groups of enemies with the Chain Lightning, and you also have the increased stun duration, you can easily kill foes. And if you also get the excess of damage causes lightning explosion AoE ability, you just end up killing enemies, and it just keeps reshocking them, and it's so broken, it's insane. But Shock Jockey scales all damage by 2 times, including headshots. So not only does it give like essentially vulnerability, but it gives like super vulnerability. So it makes your attacks against groups of foes much better, and its CC is very good. It's really good against every single enemy. I think it even shocks the Siren. I could be wrong on that, but honestly, for the Siren fight, just get a headshot weapon and just keep headshotting it at range, and you'll be fine. Or use fire weapons to burn the corpses, and then it can't create any more corpses. But yeah, Shock Jockey is definitely S tier. But now that we're recapping, I guess Shock Jockey's S tier. Because it's essentially, it's hit scan, AoE shock, damage scaling. It's really good. Okay, so Bucking Bronco I said was A tier, just for the CC. And it's cheap. Both of those are good. It can hit through walls, very strong. I never really used the traps, but you could. I don't really see the points. The upgrades for this are really good too. Charge, S tier, pretty broken. Undertow, I believe I said was C tier, because there's better alternatives. It looks really cool when you use it, but it's just not like the best thing. And then Return to Sender, S tier for the invincibility on basic use, the invincibility while holding, the damage scaling on hold it while absorbing damage, then you can throw it, the fact that you can throw it on the balls for very, very cheap and hold angles and just absorb virtually infinite bullet damage, and either do jump shots or shoot right through with projectile weapons is absolutely broken. You could abuse this to kill like almost any enemy in the game except for like volley gunners. So yeah, that's my tier list. Overall, everything is good and viable. I would say the worst thing that really stands out as the worst thing is Undertow, just because its cost is so high. If its cost was lower, it would be much better, but unfortunately, it's way too expensive. So the worst ones are basically Undertow and Crows. Crows you can combo things with, but unless you get good RNG and get a good upgrade, you're going to burn through salts running Crows. You can use them, they're not bad, but Chain Lightning's better because it's so cheap. Bucking Bronco's better because it's so cheap. Both can AoE. CC. I say Chain Lightning's better than Bucking Bronco because of the damage scaling and the fact that it can stun like more enemies. Bucking Bronco is ineffective against like machines, so it just doesn't really do anything to them. And to handymen, it doesn't really do much. I think it gives them vulnerability and interrupts them, but it doesn't like hard CC them. Whereas Shock Jockey, not only can you use it on water and then combine it with Undertow, which is like a random thing you can do, but the main thing is it scales your damage in a meaningful way, allowing you to quickly kill enemies. So yeah, that is my tier list for Bioshock Infinite. If you have any arguments as to why things should be higher or lower, make sure you make a good argument, and if it makes sense and I can verify it through testing, I can always do like an update to this video. But thanks for checking this out, and I will see you in the next video.